Leonard Arthur Lyall, 1867-1934, worked for the Chinese customs authorities as his address is given as Customs House, Shanghai. He was the author of many books about China, including the Sayings of Confucius. Information from the Chinese Maritime Customs Project website says that Leonard Arthur Lyall was born on the 28th of July 1867 in London and joined the Customs Service as 4H Assistant B on the 18th of October 1886. After 6 months' study of Chinese at Peking, he served in various capacities at Wuhu, Swatow, Takao, Shanghai 3 times, Hangzhou, Nanking, Shaxi, Dairen and Simao before returning to Peking in November 1911 as Assistant Chinese Secretary. He was promoted Deputy Commissioner on the 1st of April 1912 and Commissioner Chinese Secretary on the 1st of November 1913. Lyall served as Commissioner at Shanghai on 2 occasions, from April 1919 to October 1920 and from September 1922 to October 1925. He was 3 times appointed Vice President of the Chinese Commission for Tariff Revision, in November 1917 for the commission which sat all through 1918, in February 1922 for the commission which sat from March to September that year, and in September 1926 for the abortive commission for the compilation of values. He retired from the service on the 31st of May 1927 and accepted a post as assessor on the Opium Advisory Committee of the League of Nations, a post which he filled with so much distinction that he was subsequently appointed chairman of the committee. Lyall has translated the Analects of Confucius under the title The Sayings of Confucius, 2nd edition, London 1925, also the works of Mencius, London 1932, and is the author of the volume China in the Modern World series, London 1934. Lyall holds civil rank of the 4th class, the Order of the Chia Ho 3rd class Pao Kuang, and 2nd class Pao Kuang. Producer's note: Lyall's translations were less flowery and more down-to-earth as compared to other translations. It is an interesting read, especially his introduction to Confucius. It is with great pleasure that the producer presents an audio version of the book. Lyall's many footnotes will also be presented after each relevant section. Enjoy. Confucius was born in the year 550 BC in the land of Lu, in a small village situated in the western part of the modern province of Shantung. His name was Kung Chiu, and his style, corresponding to our Christian name, was Chung Ni. His countrymen speak of him as Kung Fu Tzu, the master or philosopher Kung. This expression was altered into Confucius by the Jesuit missionaries who first carried his fame to Europe. Footnote 1. According to the great historian Sima Qian, other authorities say 552 and 551 BC. Since the golden days of the emperors Yao and Shun, the legendary founders of the Chinese Empire, nearly 2,000 years had passed. Shun chose as his successor Yu, who had been his chief minister, a man whose devotion to duty was such that when engaged in draining the empire of the Great Flood, a task that took 8 years to accomplish, he never entered his home till the work was done, although in the course of his labors he had thrice to pass his door. He founded the Xia dynasty, which lasted till 1766 BC. The last emperor of this line, a vile tyrant, was overthrown by Tang, who became the first ruler of the House of Shang or Yin. This dynasty again degenerated in course of time and came to an end in Chou or Chouxin, 1154 to 22 BC, a monster of lust, extravagance and cruelty. The empire was only held together by the strength and wisdom of the Duke of Chu or King Wen, to give him his popular title, one of the greatest men in Chinese history. He controlled 2/3 of the empire, but believing that the people were not yet ready for a change, he refrained from dethroning the emperor. In his day, the husbandman paid 1 in 9. The pay of the officers was hereditary. Men were questioned at barriers and at markets, but there were no tolls. Fish garths were not preserved. The children of criminals were sackless. The old and wifeless, the widower, the old and husbandless, the widow, the old and childless, the lone one, the young and fatherless, the orphan. These 4 are the people most in need below heaven, and they have no one to whom to cry. So when King Wen reigned, his love went out first to them. Mencius, Book 2, Chapter 5. After his death, his son King Wu decided that the nation was ripe for change. He overcame Chouxin by force of arms, and placing himself on the throne, became the founder of the Zhou dynasty. In the time of Confucius, the Zhou dynasty still filled the throne, but it had long since become effete, and all power had passed into the hands of the great vassals. The condition of China was much like that of Germany in the worst days of the Holy Roman Empire. The emperor was powerless, the various vassal states were independent in all but name, and often at war one with the other. These states again were disintegrated, and their rulers impotent against encroaching feudatories. In Confucius's native state, Lu, the duke was a mere shadow. The younger branches of his house had usurped all power. 3 in number, they were called the 3 clans. The most important of the 3 was the Qi, or Qisun clan, whose chiefs Qi Huan and Qi Kang are often mentioned by Confucius. But the power of the Qi too was ill-secured. The minister Yang Huo overawed his master and once even threw him into prison. Nor was the condition of the other states of the empire better than that of Lu. Confucius thought it worse. Into this turbulent world Confucius was born. Though his father was only a poor military officer, he could trace his descent from the imperial house of Yin. Confucius married at 19 and is known to have had 1 son and 1 daughter. Shortly after his marriage, he entered the service of the state as keeper of the granary. A year later, he was put in charge of the public fields. In 527 BC, his mother died, and in obedience to Chinese custom, he had to retire from public life. When the years of mourning were over, he did not again take office, but devoted himself instead to study and teaching. As the years rolled by, his fame grew, and a band of pupils gathered round him. In 517 BC, the anarchy in Lu reached such a pitch that Confucius moved to the neighboring land of Qi. Here he had several interviews with the reigning duke, but met with little encouragement. So he soon returned to his native country and resumed for 15 years his work as student and teacher. During these 15 years, the power of the duke sank lower and lower, and the Qi was menaced by his minister Yang Huo. In times so dark, men that loved quiet sought in the world of thought an escape from the gloom around them, whilst others that were less resigned turned over in their minds the causes of the realm's decay. Lao Tzu, the founder of the mystic Taoist philosophy, taught that in inaction alone peace can be found. Mo Tzu proclaimed the doctrine of universal love, that we should love all men as we love self, love the parents of others as we love our own parents. Upright men were driven or fled from the world. Confucius often met them in his wanderings and was reproved for not doing as they did. But his practical mind told him that inaction could not help the world, and that to find a remedy for the nation's ills, their cause must first be learned. This could only be done by historical study. He therefore devoted himself to the study of past times, edited in later life the Book of History, and compiled the work called Spring and Autumn, a history of his native state from 722 to 481 BC. To bring again the golden days of Yao and Shun, a return must be made to the principles of Wen and Wu, the kings that had rebuilt the empire after tyranny and selfishness had laid it low. Of impracticable ideals and renunciation of the world, no good could come. At last, in 501 BC, Yang Huo was forced to flee from Lu, and prospects brightened. A year later, Confucius was appointed governor of a town. So great was his success as governor that before long he was promoted to be superintendent of works, and then to be chief criminal judge. He won great influence with his master, and did much to lighten the general misery. He so strengthened the power of the duke that neighboring states grew jealous. To sow dissension between duke and minister, the men of Chai sent the duke a gift of singing girls. Such joy they gave him that for 3 days no court was held. On this, Confucius left the land 497 BC. For the next 13 years, Confucius wandered from land to land, followed by his disciples, seeking in vain for a ruler that was willing to employ him and whom he was willing to serve. At times he was exposed to danger, at other times to want. But as a rule he was treated with consideration, although his teachings were ignored. Yet 13 years of homeless wandering, of hopes deferred and frustrated, must have been hard to bear. When he left office, Confucius was already 53 years old, and his life so far seemed a failure. The sense of his wasted powers may well have tempted him now and again to take office under an unworthy ruler, but knowing that no good could come of it, he refrained, and probably he never seriously thought of doing so. In 483 BC, when Confucius was 66 years old, through the influence of his disciple Jian Yu, who was in the service of the Qi, the master was invited to return to his native land. Here he remained till his death in 479 BC. He had many interviews with the reigning duke and the head of the Qi clan, but gained no influence over either of them. So he turned once more to his favorite studies, edited the Book of Poetry, perhaps the most interesting collection of ancient songs extant, and wrote Spring and Autumn. His closing years were darkened by the loss of those dearest to him. First his son died, then Yen Yuan, the disciple whom he loved best. At his death the master was overcome by grief, and he left none behind him that loved learning. Lastly, Tsulu the frank and bold was killed in battle. A little later in his 71st year, Confucius himself passed away, 479 BC. This book of the master's sayings is believed by the Chinese to have been written by the disciples of Confucius. But there is nothing to prove this, and some passages in the book point the other way. Book 8 speaks of the death of Cheng Tzu, who did not die till 437 BC, 42 years after the master. The chief authority for the text as it stands today is a manuscript found in the house of Confucius in 150 BC, hidden there in all likelihood between the years 213 and 211 BC, when the reigning emperor was seeking to destroy every copy of the classics. We find no earlier reference to the book under its present name. But Mencius, 372-289 BC, quotes 7 passages from it in language all but identical with the present text as the words of Confucius. No man ever talked the language of these sayings. Such pith and smoothness is only reached by a long process of rounding and polishing. We shall probably come no nearer to the truth than Legge's conclusion that the book was put together by the pupils of the disciples of Confucius, from the words and notebooks of their masters, about the year 400 BC. Leonard Lyall, Amalfi, January 1909. Thanks for watching. Please like and subscribe for more excellent content.